Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Nation Watch. It's Sunday, 9th March 2025. We are in an election year, and we are in a winning mood. Yesterday, we observed Saturday, 8th March 2025, we observed International Women's Day. Nation Watch takes this opportunity to extend belated best wishes to all the women in our society, whether you're from the legislature, the judiciary, the education sector, the factories, the fields, the offices, wherever you operate in the homes. Nation Watch salutes all women everywhere for International Women's Day 2025 and every day, particularly our mothers. Today, my guest on Nation Watch is Mr. Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament, leader of the People's National Congress Reform, and leader of the parliamentary opposition. Today, we are going to be discussing a range of issues with Mr. Norton. Mr. Norton, welcome to Nation Watch, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thanks for having me, Mervyn, and a very good day to your listening and viewing audience, and similarly belated greetings to all the women across this country, especially those in our party and our families.
Today marks the 96th birth anniversary of Hugh Desmond Hoyt, former leader of the party, former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and past leader of the parliamentary opposition. Today, we also salute Hugh Desmond Hoyt, his life of service to our country, his life of service to our party. Mr. Norton, elections are constitutionally due by November 2nd, 2025. The opposition has continually been involved in picketing exercises outside GCOM religiously every Tuesday. The picketing exercises are aimed at achieving a clean voters list and biometrics at the place of poll. Political opposition, parliamentary and non-parliamentary parties, the labor movement and other elements of civil society, citizens in general have been calling for a clean voters list and biometrics at the place of poll. Even the People's Progressive Party in 2025 called for it. But now, 2015, I beg your pardon, they called for it. And now they have turned their backs on that call. Where are we in terms of accomplishing the realization of a clean voters list?
Well, I would say some things are leading in the direction that we can get at least biometrics. I've said if the government is being factual, that they have registered, including taking pictures, preparing a database. If what they're saying is true, then clearly we can get biometrics and a clean voters list. Of course, we will have to clean up the process, because one of the things that is manifest in this process of delivering cash grants is the incompetence of the government. So I do believe with competent people and institutions, we can get biometrics at least, and possibly a clean voters list. I think that they are critical for the elections outcome to be acceptable by all. To go into the elections without a clean voters list is in itself a recipe for post-election problems. And the PPP government has to decide if it wants post-elections confusion, or if it wants to have biometrics, a clean voters list, and ensure that the election results are acceptable to all Guyanese, regardless of their political persuasion. That is the issue before us. We have been working with the international community. We continue to work with them. We welcome the fact that the European Union has already here in Guyana people to see what is happening. I did make the point to the European Union and others that you cannot come into Guyana a month or two before the elections and understand what is happening in Guyana. You need to be here before, so you understand the evolution of it. And in that regard, I'm thankful that they have agreed to come. They have been engaging, we have been expressing our views, and it is our hope that with political action and the support of the international community, we will get biometrics in a clean voters list.
This has been resisted, particularly by the government-appointed representatives on the commission and the chairman of the commission for almost 5 years. Without perhaps going into too much details, what guarantees or what gives you a sense of confidence that this is achievable?
It is what gives me a sense of confidence is achievable because countries have done it in a shorter time, and to that extent, the question of it being achievable is off of the table. The government seems to be dilly-dallying and doing all kinds of things to ensure that it arrives at a point where there is no time to do it. Of course, there are a lot of negative consequences for that, but I'm still optimistic that good sense will prevail and that we will at minimum get biometrics and be able to ensure the outcome of the elections reflect the interests and the will of the people. I think the government knows that it is weak. The government knows that its approach to governance has acted negatively against them. I think the government is aware, notwithstanding the polls they are trying to put out, that they are nowhere close to winning, much less the landslide that people like Jack D are talking about. What they're trying to do is to create in the minds of the people that they are popular and that they can have a landslide. But anyone who moves around the country and hear people talk about the high cost of living, hear people express their dissatisfaction with the government, will know that they are nowhere in the picture when it comes to winning the next elections. So the government is going to do everything to ensure that we do not get a clean voters list, because that creates the opportunity for them to be involved in illegalities. We have already established that they will stop at nothing. If something as simple as the local government election, the vice president had to apologize for forged signature and all kinds of fraud, that is indicative of the mindset of the People's Progressive Party. Clearly, they're in the mode to do anything, including rigging, to ensure that they stay in government. That has serious negative consequences for Guyana. I don't think the Guyanese people are in the mood for another term of the People's Progressive Party.
Comment briefly, Mr. Norton, on the difference between the number of the actual population, last census available information, latest available information, the size of the population versus the latest size of the voters list. I think it's perhaps about 11,000 or so difference.
Between 11 and 14.
Yeah.
Now, the government obviously doesn't care. It is well known, and I said this a while, one of the reasons that we weren't going to do the claim objection is that it can't be used to clean the list. That's the first. And the second reason, if this continues, the population will be greater than the voters list, will be higher than the estimated population. And I think we'll score another first. We'll be the first country in the world to have more people on our voters list than people that exist in the country. And so I think we should just let it go. You already at 700 and I think 38,000 people in an estimated population of 750,000. I don't think any government will be able to explain that as it relates to the contention they make. The contention they make is that they cannot take people off the list because of the Chief Justice ruling. But we have already said that that is nonsense. The government and the opposition can get together in Parliament and change the rules to ensure that the list reflects the reality rather than this situation where even the smallest child will recognize that you cannot have a voters list that is larger or close to the population size. More so when you're claiming to be giving cash grants to children, and you're saying it's about 220,000 children. So the government is putting itself in a place where it is in conflict with reality.
Final question on the question of GCOM and the list, Mr. Norton. Are you comfortable that with the accomplishment of biometrics at the place of poll, duplicate voting, impersonation of voters and so on will be issues that will be eliminated from the process?
Well, I wouldn't say eliminated. I would say significantly reduced. In this world where trickery, and more so when you're doing the PP government, where all they do is become involved in illegalities and trickery, one can never rule out there will be some amount of discrepancies. But what we do believe is that if there are biometrics in the way we thinking about it, where you have this little machine that is facial or finger, most people now are opting for facial. Once they put their face there or their finger there, the light goes up and it makes the sound. Then right away, questions would be raised. And I believe that can contribute to a reduction in impersonation. And so we will continue to pursue a clean voters list, but we don't see it as the end at all. It's a measure that can help, but it can't solve the problem totally. The time is ticking on a clean voters list. I think the government is probably strategizing in this way. One, they know they're in crisis, and so they are trying to delay it to say that there is not enough time. And if they don't get through with that, then they will say, look, we need additional time to be able to do it. And so they will want to have an agreement with the opposition to agree for the elections to be held at a later date. At this stage, I'm not at all convinced that we should do that. But in politics, you never say never. When the time comes, it will be dealt with.
When the time comes, is it time now, Mr. Norton, in your judgment, based on your 50-odd years of political experience and training, is it the time now to commence a massive communication campaign with the masses, whether it be by, I know you've started with outreaches, meeting people at their homes, distributing handbills with policy papers and so on. But is it time to engage in symposia, in street corner meetings, in larger rallies? Is it time now?
One of the difficulties you have is that you don't know the exact date of the election. It's not like American election where the date is fixed. What I have been doing is I'm seeing that, look, the earliest the elections could be, to me, is around July. I'm not one who believes the government is going to push it till to the end unless it becomes absolutely necessary. So what I will do is we will time it and begin the process you talk about, targeting July as the possible date, with options for if it goes to August, September, October, November. I think you have to, it's a fluid situation, and you have to develop your options. Put your machine to idle so that when you're ready for it to go full blast, it's there. And so to me, that is the approach that is needed.
Cost of living. You have, in a very personal way, articulated the suffering of the people of this country. You have been in touch with them. You have visited them in their homes, in their workplaces, in the alleys and the byways of villages across the country, including the hinterland. You have seen firsthand the suffering of the people. You have put out there some alternative measures to what the PPP is actually doing. It appears as though the PPP has lost hope in winning these elections, to the extent that they intend to treat the ballot, treat the vote as a commodity to be traded. And state resources are being employed in that regard. in different forms. How do you view the cash grants that are being distributed in terms of their impact, first of all, on cost of living, and outline for us, secondly, for the purpose of this program? I know you've done it before, but for the purpose of this program, some of the measures that you intend to implement once in government.
Well, I don't like the concept of cash grant. I've even asked our PR people to use the term cash transfer. Grant has a connotation as if somebody's giving you something.
That is why I used it in the context of the PPP operation.
Well, for me, this is the people's money, and what the government is doing is transferring some of the money to them. And that is why I prefer the concept of cash transfer. One has to go back to understand where we are with cash grant. We had consistently talked about cash transfer. The government, both the vice president and the president, had argued that Ghana couldn't afford it. People forget that. And we consistently argued that they should be cash transferred to the people because of the high cost of living and the fact that there was increased income. In fact, we still argue that they can get much more from the money that came from the windfall that they had, I think, in 2023. Mm-hmm. But the government doesn't go down that road. Now, we have pressured the government into delivering cash transfer. The government first said 200,000 a month. We then made the point, 200,000 to every household.
To every household, yeah.
Our concern at the time was that in the COVID-19 distribution, the government selectively decided what was a household and what wasn't. When they were in their strongholds, they were anybody and everybody. But when it came to opposition strongholds, they were asking for transport and confirmation that the property belonged to those people. So we thought that our citizenry shouldn't be faced with that again. And so we made the point that cash transfer should be done to everyone 18 years and above. The government then came back and said they will give 100,000 to everyone 18 years and above, which I think is better than 200,000 per household. The problem, however, is that the government has proven to be incompetent because it wasn't part of their policy, because it wasn't part of their intention. They were unprepared. The political forces forced them to go in the direction of this cash grant. And so everybody know what they did. They butchered it all across the country. They went so far, I didn't register at all. And they're so desperate, they produced a check with my name on it and piece of an ID card showing, suggesting that I would have lost my check. I told the Guyanese public, I never registered. And if they had produced the check, they had violated their own position. I remember Ashley Singh loudly shouting, if you don't register, you can't get cash grant. So when I saw the check, I laughed because I didn't register. But that is the low level the PPP will stoop to. Now, having done the cash grant, their incompetence has caused them to become more unpopular as a result of it. We have our views on cash transfer. We believe that the Guyanese people are entitled to having cash transferred to them from the resources that are coming from oil. We have always taken that position. The government didn't. No, but we do believe that the government is using it as a political tool to control. And don't forget, before they bring this, they were giving their supporters, and don't mix up here supporters to mean all Indo-Guyanese, because one of the problems they have is a lot of Indo-Guyanese in the communities they live weren't getting anything, even though the PPP were given to their close people, their family, friends, and favorites, money. And so they were constantly distributing these resources to people. We took a different position. It should be well organized. It should be predictable. We say in government, we will do cash transfer. It will go to people's bank accounts. It will be in a structured way. If it is 50,000 a month, people will know that they're getting 50,000 a month and they can access it and they can use it as income when they go to a bank, etc. So for us, the cash grant or the cash transfer must not be used as a political tool for domination and control, which is what the PPP is doing. I mean, they are so ridiculous that key persons that go to the cash grant, they want to take the picture and to put it in the newspaper. I know many people who refuse to collect it because they want a picture and want to use it for political ends. Cash transfer should be targeted at improving the lives of the people of Guyana. Unfortunately, this 100,000 cannot. Like I said in our press conference, people are paying what the bills that they have because they're already in debt. People are living from paycheck to paycheck, and 100,000 cannot impact them. There are a number of measures that we have recommended to impact our people in a positive way. We say give a livable income. Ensure people can access the resources they need to live rather than having to live from paycheck to paycheck. So we have put high on our agenda, giving people a livable income. We also believe our pensioners are badly treated. The PPP came to government stating that they will give $50,000 to pensioners. At present, the pension is at 41,000, which means they did not honor their election promise, and they clearly have no intention of honoring it because they've already put in the budget how much they will allocate. They have agreed to 8% wages increase for this year. That again is an indication that they have no intention of giving people a livable income. We have made it very clear we will carry the minimum wage up. We will ensure that people can get a livable income. The cost of living is extremely high, and therefore there are need for measures to reduce the impact of the high cost of living. Some of them we recommend is that we say we will give a $10,000 electricity subsidy, which would mean anybody who paying 10,000 or less wouldn't be paying electricity. It will be subsidized by the government. We're saying that we'll give a water subsidy so that it can impact people in a positive way, cushion the high cost of living as we talk about. We have also, in my address to Parliament, I did say we should move Tushao and councillors from a stipend to a salary because they have to do work and they have to live. And if we continue to just give people a stipend, then some of the illegalities you're seeing will continue. And we believe one way to ensure people serve rather than go there to accumulate wealth, which is the example the PPP set in, a very bad example. We believe the way to go is to give a salary so that people can perform the functions they need to perform. And then there are another category of pensioners we have to deal with. Everywhere I go, I meet the retired public servants who say to you, look, my pension is at 1998 or 1990 or 1997 levels. We have got to bring government pension much closer to the reality than it is at present. There are ministers, former ministers of government in both political parties who are complaining of their pension. And so there's need for a complete overhaul of the system as it relates to pension, so that those persons who would have served this country can live a much better life than they are living. So we will relook the pension and ensure that apart from increasing the present pension, the government pension needs to be addressed so that people can live a quality life.
There is clearly, well, before I go there, we had up on the screen a moment ago the confusion that ensued wherever cash grant distribution was scheduled to take place. Guyanese citizens were treated in a very, very, I'd say, subhuman manner when they turn up there to collect their cash grants. We can just put that back there so that our viewing public can recognize the manner in which we are treated as citizens, the level of disrespect and disregard, particularly for women and elderly citizens. But before I go to the other particular cash grant I want to deal with, what is evident, Mr. Norton, is that the proposed wage increases, wage and salary increases that the PPP envisaged for 2025, an election year, largest budget ever, fastest growing economy in the world, the rate of increase for public servants is below the rate of food inflation in this country. Guyanese are destined to endure some greater hardships. It is suggested that agricultural other crops is on the increase. It is evident that the increased production, if there is in fact increased production, goes offshore, does not stay here to satisfy Guyanese citizens in our local society. It goes out there, and a handful of people will benefit, and that's good. But enough food is not being produced for the local market. Talk to us a little bit about how you see the impact of the below average, below par, far too low proposed wages increase and the impact on our people.
Before we go to the wage increase, let us talk about what we need to do. The government is talking about food security. We had food security in this country for years. Under Forbes Burnham, we produced the food we need. It is true that there were foreign foods that weren't available on some occasions, but the reality is we have been producing the food we need. I've consistently said that the government needs to expand agriculture, shift it from just being region 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and part of region 4, and work towards a program in which every region becomes self-sustainable in food. I mentioned going into, and you were with me when we were going to Paramakatay.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Paramakatay, Port Kaituma,
yeah,
where you saw bora being loaded, chicken, cabbage. Clearly, if the government had interest, they can develop an agricultural program in all of those sub-regions and regions generally, and ensure that there's a production of the goods that are needed, which will impact the cost of living in a positive way. And I say to you, in government, we will have, as part of the National Agricultural Program, regional agricultural programs that allow regions to increase their agricultural output with the aim of bringing down the cost of living and generating employment for people. And so I do believe that that is critical. But we have ministers of government who are linked to smuggling. It is well established that chicken is being smuggled into this country, and senior government officials ensure that they come through. And then when they get here, they are repacked in a bag as if it is Guyanese. But all of us who go and drive and go to the Rupununi will see the trucks coming with the chicken from Brazil.
Yeah.
And we know its negative impact on the local industry. So while the government is talking about self-sufficiency, we are moving from a point where we used to produce all the chicken we need to importing it. And that is a manifestation of the failure of the government. So why would I raise that first? I raise that first because what the government tends to say, if you put more money in the system, you are going to produce inflation. It doesn't necessarily follow. But what I'm saying is if you do the work to improve production and productivity, you're going to be in a better position, and the government is doing that. We come down to the wage increase. You made the statement that the wages aren't increasing in keeping with the rate of food inflation particularly. Well, that is for the ordinary man. I showed people through figures that when the worker who is getting $100,000 a month, that 10% last year, their salary increased by 10,000. When the president got that increase, his salary increased by 290,000 a month. What that means is he could live the life. What that means is people who join, and I did not mention to any people's no taxes. I can't remember if you pay no taxes. I know the Attorney General doesn't pay that. I can't remember, so I don't want to comment on it. But this, if you join $1 million a month, and you get a 10% increase, you're getting 100,000. The average worker is getting 10,000. And therefore, the average worker cannot keep up with the food inflation. But how many people can keep up with that inflation? And that is why we were saying that what the AP and new AFC did was much better. And we should go back to it. Give larger increases to the bottom end so that these persons who would have gotten 10% in the bottom end could have gotten 35 or 40%. And when they got 35 or 40%, let's say we put it at 4%. Rather than getting 10,000, they would have gotten 40,000. And if at the level of the president and the others, they get 1% or a 0.5%, then you would have had a similarity, a much closer situation in terms of the worker getting more so that they can effectively live in the society while the elites in the society get less. And I believe one of the fundamental problems is that this system of across the board salary increases serve the PPP, their family, the friends, and the favorite who are the top. We have to change that and ensure we use a system in which the people at the bottom get more and the people at the top get less. That to me is where
It is clear from what you said, Mr. Norton, that there's a recognition of a failed agricultural program. A failed agricultural program is hurting our people and causing greater hardship when it comes to the cost of living as a burden to carry. We have images from the Port Kaituma airstrip where aircrafts flew in, green vegetables and chicken. We'd like to bring that up so that the public can see that we're not making stories up here. Port Kaituma is, in fact, a hinterland community, and that was once a very prosperous agricultural community. In fact, one of the largest cattle ranches was at Arakaco, which is not too far away from there, and that was a thriving manganese mining town and agricultural area. Mr. Norton, there emerged from a knee-jerk reaction a grant payable to mothers, Guyanese mothers. Every Guyanese mother who gets a child in this year, 2025. There's no rationale behind this thing. There's no indication that this is the startup of a long-term program to incentivize population increase. There's absolutely no idea that has been shared with the public about the rationale behind this thing. And it clearly is a one-off grant. It clearly is an election gimmick. But what is alarming here outside of the absence of studies and justification, what is alarming is the manner in which this government is treating our women and our children. We have images posted by the government of women who have got to walk with their babies under difficult circumstances, produce their babies in order to be considered for this grant. Mr. Norton, talk to us about the sociological impact of the treatment of our women and children in this society, in this election year, in this fastest growing economy.
The government is anachronistic. There are babies who are born at home, very few now. Most are born in hospitals. All you need to do is to put the mechanism in place for the hospital to report on births, provide the data and information, and then a check could be cut and delivered to the parents. But this government likes a picture like you see there, where a set of people assemble and they think it has PR value. I don't think it has much PR value for them. It humiliates the women. But you have to understand why the government arrived here. I think it's either in the 2022 or 2023 budget presentation. PNCR Chairman Sherwin Holder did refer to assistance to women who would have given birth. And I think he did mention Libya. And the government has this way of listening to what we say and then come 2 or 3 years after with it as if it is theirs. But the problem they have is that they don't structure it. Clearly, they announced in the parliament that they will give newborn mothers. They even said they can give people who get married. But there's no mechanism put in place to ensure that it happens properly without humiliating the people who have got to receive it. And the government, I think, pays little or no attention to the impact, the negative impact of herding our people together to give them assistance. If you go to any of the banks in last week, you see a lot of confusion as people trying to get the 100,000. I had said before, a lot of the public servants, a lot of people have bank accounts. It could have been placed in their bank accounts and you wouldn't have had some of the problems that they have. Now, as it relates to helping pregnant mothers, etc., there's need for a more comprehensive approach. We believe that there is a place for early childhood education in this country. And we have said that we will develop a system, a national system of early childhood education, so that when a child is born, very early they are part of an education system that begins the process of teaching them, not necessarily one and one makes two, but through practical and other involvement, you began to teach them. And so you are beginning to cultivate the child from a very tender age into the person you want. In that process, we have spoken about giving hot meals to our children. That will help in terms of reducing the costs to parents, both in the child care system and in the primary and nursery school levels. We have got to, in a very structured way, develop mechanisms to put resources or make resources available to parents so that we reduce the impact of the high cost of living on them. And it is our intention to work to do that. And while the idea of giving a parent 100,000 at birth mightn't even cover the hospital bill.
It wouldn't.
It wouldn't. And if they go to the private hospital, the public hospitals, you know what's happening. So to me, we have to improve health. It is critical that we improve the quality of health. And that quality health must be free. What that means is there's going to be accessibility to quality health care. That will help the parent. Then we talk about hot meals, etc., which would help and impact the cost of living. These ad hoc approaches allow the PPP to herd people together, take pictures, and look as if they are doing something. But in reality, they are humiliating rather than improving the life of the Guyanese people. I'm on the road every day. I think it was Saturday, I was on the famous Bam Bam Alley that people are critical of. And two young women came up to us. They're selling water. And when you say to them, 2 want water, they say, oh, uncle, buy this water from me now. I need the money. So it's not a lack of desire to work. If you move the streets of Guyana, you see a lot of women, children selling and virtually begging you to purchase from them because there isn't a circulation of money in the society to the man below. And that is where I think we have to solve the problem. We have to put resources in the hands of the people at the lower level of the society so that they can develop and not go through the humiliation they are faced to go through in the present environment. So it's need for a comprehensive approach.
Corruption at the highest level in this country evidently serves as one of the fuels for the high cost of living. And here we'll have a quick look at the famous corruption story. They seem to be the parent of corruption in Guyana.
Unless you say who the person is, I can't comment on anonymous people.
Okay, well, let's talk about specific individuals. What is your relationship with Mr. Su Jurong?
So, so my relationship, nothing. He's
This is evidently the highest level where corruption resides. This is the kind of corruption that has never been investigated, never been inquired into, never been treated with by the government of Guyana. And this is the action that evidently gives license for persons lower down the chain of authority to, with impunity, pursue acts of corruption on their own and for the satisfaction of their own greed. Let's look at this once more, Mr. Norton. Talk to us about, after this, about corruption and its impact, and whether if we cut corruption in this country, how significant would savings be to go into the pockets and on the tables of our people in this country. Let's just look at this clip once more.
Unless you say who the person is, I can't comment on anonymous people.
Okay, well, let's talk about specific individuals. What is your relationship with Mr. Su Jurong?
So my relationship, nothing. He's a tenant in my place, yeah.
And he's a good friend of yours?
Yes, yes, he is a friend of ours.
This, Mr. Norton, gives context to most of what you've said on corruption in this country. Talk to us.
Well, the first thing to be said here is the fact that with all the calls for investigating that issue, there was no investigation. Signaled that the Ghana police force cannot investigate corruption. And therefore, by the very fact that I heard some allegations being made, I don't know whether it's true or not, about illegalities in NDCs, etc. and that I heard my friend Arlene Landlord saying we call in the police. Had they called in the police when the allegations are made at a high level, it would have deterred people from going in the direction of corruption. That it is perceived, and a lot of times reality, that there is significant corruption at the highest level of this society. Creates the condition for people below to believe corruption is normal. I said in the press conference we had on Friday, you always see them charging and putting somebody before the court for a little bit of cocaine, a little bit of marijuana. But there's a big bust in the Matthews Ridge in the Northwest. All around, when there is a big corruption case, it dies away. The masterminds are never caught. That has become part and parcel of the culture in this society. So corruption at the highest level is the example that is set for people lower down. When you hear a lot of people sympathetic to Brutus, you know why you hear that? Because in their opinion, this government is so corrupt that it cannot be a genuine thing of fighting corruption. In Brutus's case, it does appear to me that there was an inability to cover up whatever happened. I'm not saying Brutus is guilty or not guilty. That's for the courts to decide. But whatever happened, it wasn't covered up. And it came out. That it come out very early, you heard Jack Leo was threatening. And now you're hearing they withholding evidence, a number of things. I had said long before this case tried that the government has two options. They cannot afford for this case to go to court and for there to be a proper trial. Because if they do that and there are exposures, they're in trouble. And I did say the alternative is to probably get rid of Brutus. Corruption has impacted this country negatively. It is estimated that 40% of our money spent, it goes into corruption. What that means is for every million, if we eradicate corruption or reduce it, you're going to be saving 400,000? Mm-hmm. 400,000. Multiply that many times.
I think overall it's about quarter of the budget.
And that is what I have said. It's a little more than quarter of the budget.
No, because the 40% I think is identified with infrastructure, which is about 55% of the budget.
But the thing is, corruption is condoned. Corruption is part of the lifestyle of the People's Progressive Party. I've continuously said on this program that if the vice president and the president could put the resources, the property, etc. they have against their income over the years, and it can establish that these things have been gotten as a result of my income. I've said more than once I will resign, but they cannot do that. They cannot do that because of the level of corruption. They know it's a corrupt society. They know that they condone the corruption. They know that they can't take action against policemen because of corruption. Now, this country is a place that is laughable. You're trying to tell me that the government didn't know Mohammed didn't pay what they allege he had to pay? They obviously knew. But because Azuruddin is emerging as a political challenge, it now becomes necessary to go after him. I am not here defending Mohammed or anybody. But this is the second time. One time Jack Doe said, if he goes into politics, we'll charge him for murder. In any normal society in which corruption is not the boss, Jack Doe himself will be charged because it is evident that he's withholding information. As I understand it under the law, you cannot know of a murder, have knowledge of a murder, and refuse to provide it to the police.
Or know of tax evasion, not collect it, and then conveniently later
So
on.
if you're saying all the time, this was your friend, I notice he's trying to distance and not a friend, but all of us know the reality. If you were saying that now, for whatever reason, you are going to go after somebody because there's a fallout, then you yourself should be ashamed because you have condoned, you are part of, and it can only come over as political vindictiveness and wickedness. If you had this information all the time, and only when the person constitutes a political challenge, then and only then you are prepared to go after them, then you are saying that you are prepared to condone illegalities when it serves your political purpose. And when it doesn't, you will go after them. What that means is a lot of the minions around the PPP have got to worry, because the minute they need to throw you under the bus, they will throw you under the bus. And corruption is interwoven into the fabric of the PPP. The two terms can be used synonymously. In this society, if you say PPP, the first thing that comes to people's mind is corruption. And so this government cannot solve the problem of corruption. It is too corrupt. The only thing that is going to result in a change is a change of government. The PPP has outlived its usefulness as a political party that can contribute to the development of Guyana and ensure transparency and accountability. They don't even have a semblance of integrity. And so the Guyanese people are compelled to make a decision to remove the People's Progressive Party from government as the first step in dealing with the high levels of corruption in this society.
Let's talk a bit about defense of Guyana. The Venezuelan military, using a Venezuelan flagged warship, entered Guyana's territorial waters, interacted with and threatened foreign investors operating in Guyana's economic zone. ExxonMobil assets were threatened. Guyana's sovereignty and territorial integrity was threatened. The president engaged you. You subsequently had a meeting. How did that go? Where are we in terms of continued interaction, continuous briefing, bringing you up to scratch with what's happening?
No, the government is very selective in terms of engaging. Whenever they engage, you know they're in deep trouble with Venezuela. That is now a given. There are those who believe I should not engage. I don't share that view. I believe Guyana's existence is first and foremost. And Venezuela threatens Guyana's existence. And therefore, as leader of the opposition, as a citizen of this country, and as a leader of the PNC, a party that is without doubt the joint services vote for in every elections, I am obligated to engage to ensure that we protect our territorial integrity. And so every time that the president engaged me on this issue, I engaged him. I'm, however, unhappy because the incompetence of the government is manifest. In this last engagement, we had agreed on a joint statement. That statement was prepared and was never put in the public domain, which is a manifestation of a lack of trust. The foreign minister got it, and no action was taken. Now, Venezuela has been after Guyana since 1962. I mean, in modern times. Now, we have always had, as our first line of defense, diplomacy. I'm saying to you that we have made numerous recommendations to the government, both at the parliamentary level and in my discussions. For instance, we call for the establishment of a border commission that will allow professional and technical people to be involved in the discussion continuously to be able to advise the government. That has been rejected. We have also said to the government, you need an aggressive public relations program at home. On the last occasion, they put out 2 things and then they stopped. You cannot expect a population to defend their territorial integrity and rights if they themselves are not constantly reminded and educated on the situation. And the failure to have a proper public relations program is an indictment on the government, because by the very process, they are not winning the war of creating consciousness in the society. The second thing I want to say, we said to them, there are a lot of people in Latin America, across the world, who do not know about our case, that we should be sending envoys with packages to educate them or to engage them so that they know the strength of our case. We also said that the government should take out in newspapers in Latin America and the Caribbean full-page ads sensitizing people to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. Even that they didn't do. I pointed out to the president, and I pointed out before, that Venezuela used Petrocaribe to push back on our influence in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I said to the government, we need to use some of our oil resources in a similar way to help small Caribbean countries so that we have economic and other links to them that will help to facilitate them supporting us. Foreign policy is not something to joke with. You have to have clear strategies to engage countries so that those countries can support you. It is good to say you have the support of 1 or 2 countries, but our first line of defense has to be CARICOM. Now, having worked out your diplomatic infrastructure, you still have to have a defense strategy, a military defense strategy. You cannot be under-resourcing the Guyana Defense Force and expect it to perform. You cannot be under-training people in the Guyana Defense Force and expect it to perform. I've said to the president the time before, and I know I don't think I said it this time, but the time before, I did say that we need to increase the resources to the Ghana Defense Force. We need to equip them to be able to deal with a Venezuelan incursion. You're not here going for a war. You are using your diplomacy, you are using your information, but you must have the capacity to defend your territory if the need arises. I recall pointing out that after either security guard or somebody close to Vice President Jack Doe, then president, dropped down and died at Takam or some way, the government reduced the training. The solution can never be reduction in the training. The solution has to be in increased training and ensuring we have the capacity to deal with Venezuela on the ground. Because even if you will get international assistance, you will have to wait for it to arrive. And so I think that there's need for a diplomatic strategy and a strategy to recapitalize the Guyana Defense Force and train it to the level that we had in the 70s, where every Guyanese felt, oh, they're more powerful than we. But if they hit the ground, we in the game, because we are well equipped in terms of jungle warfare, etc. The government seems to not grasp that. And when people say to me, I shouldn't engage the government, I have to. Apart from the general Guyanese public, we consider the Guyana Defense Force to come from our major support base. And it is our obligation to speak to the government to ensure those Guyanese have the resources to defend Guyana and to defend themselves.
It is for the reason you just mentioned that there is a society-wide belief that the People's Progressive Party is afraid of the Guyana Defense Force membership. And it is because of that fear that is believed to exist in the leadership of the People's Progressive Party that they have de-emphasized the training and the equipping of the Guyana Defense Force. The time that we are at now is where that has backfired. One officer, and we have some images, one officer and 5 other ranks of the Guyana Defense Force were shot and injured in Guyana's territory. The Guyana government is saying that there were criminal elements who attacked the army, the military in Guyana, that they were sindicatos, a criminal group from Venezuela. Others believe, others who are knowledgeable of this particular area, believe that it was a direct attack by the Venezuelan military under the guise of being a criminal group. Our soldiers were injured and had to rely on I believe the Tushao of Kaikan and a local boat operator to get our people out. You talked about underpreparedness. This is an example of being underprepared. How do we, as citizens who each have a right and obligation to defend our territory, feel comfortable in these circumstances?
It is foolhardy to separate the sindicatos from the government of Venezuela.
Well, they're commanded by a military officer and they're all military trained. So
that's the first error of the government. We should see any action in our border area as an action by the government. And yes, we leave scope for if there is an incident that may be the aberration rather than the rule. But generally, our position should be the borders aren't left to whims and fancies. The border is a heavily protected area by Venezuela, and any activities in that area will obviously have to either have the consent or the government complicit in their action. So for me, it is foolhardy for us to be talking about the sindicatos and what they're doing. Additionally, I've long argued And I remember Roysdale Ford arguing in the parliament that there's need for a proper migration policy in the light of what is happening. None has emerged. The government seems to be happy with Venezuelans coming and they're giving them ID card so that they can vote. Now, you mentioned the PPP's position in the Guyana Defense Force. I have heard this argument. I believe it in some regard. But I'm saying the government must treat this as a national issue and eschew, forego its partisan beliefs and ensure that the army is prepared to defend our territorial integrity and sovereignty. It is not like if Guyana has had a history of coups, so you should worry. Guyana has been a place where the military operate under the control of civilian government. And therefore, I do not see why the government should be afraid to give the training that is necessary to the Guyana Defense Force. I believe it is foolhardy, it is narrow-minded, and we need to approach this entire thing as the people of Guyana coming up against a serious threat to our territorial integrity and sovereignty. And I believe that is the way it should be approached rather than partisan politics. I'm criticized by some people because there are people who believe this government is so brutal, it is so dictatorial, it is so corrupt that to even talk to them is to legitimize them. That is a view that is out there. Of course, as leader, I have to make decisions based on an assessment, having involved people in the know, and then we make the decision. And we have made a decision that on this issue, unless something real out of the way occurs, we are prepared to support the government, but we are dissatisfied because they are not taking the recommendations on board that will help the people of Guyana and protect our territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Venezuela has grown increasingly aggressive towards Guyana. Venezuela has constructed a bridge. They have moved military assets to the eastern half of Ancoco, Guyana's territory, which they occupied since 1966. There's a shooting of our soldiers. Back in 2008, I think it was 2 pontoons of a mining enterprise were blown up by Venezuelan military in Guyana's territory. There have been fighter jets fly over back then in 2008, 2009. Now there are reports about strange helicopters flying over various areas in Essequibo. There was the landing of a Venezuelan helicopter, military helicopter at CARICOM a couple of years ago. All these things have been happening. And now Venezuela has decided that one day before Guyana's independence anniversary, they're going to have municipal elections, and they're going to hold the elections for a governor of Essequibo, which they now have added, according to their story, they've added Essequibo as an additional state to Venezuela. And on May 25th in this year, they plan to have elections for the governor. Already one has been appointed. A military general has been appointed. They have a budget. The budget is what facilitated that military operation in our waters. This aggression, the timing of this proposed election is what in Guyanese parlance we say is, I pass. Have you discussed with the president of Guyana this issue of imminent Venezuelan elections in and about the county of Essequibo?
No, I haven't. We didn't get into that depth. What I can say, though, is that it is evident to me that as Venezuelan, the domestic crisis in Venezuela, as it intensifies, Venezuela needs the option of focusing Venezuelans on problems outside of Venezuela. And one of the things that's readily available for that is the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. So I anticipate that whenever there are internal problems, we will see aggression. That's one. I also believe sometimes it is a function of the geopolitical situation. Depending on how governments operate, etc., Venezuela tend to react. But for me, we, in some regard, aren't doing what we should do to put Venezuela in check. I outlined the things to you. If Venezuela is caught in a position where the world is sensitized, they have very few allies, if any, then they will be compelled to operate differently. But if we are not doing our work to put them in that position, then we are giving them the scope. And then I think it is, I am one who don't believe that Ralph Gonzalez should be involved in the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy at any level. He made a comment that suggests he's more inclined to Venezuela than Guyana. I accept that he's a leader in the Caribbean, but when somebody, I don't remember the exact comment, but something to the effect that Guyana is best served with Venezuela, that to me is an indication that Guyana cannot see him as an interlocutor who is impartial. And while I did support, well, I want to put it differently. While I do believe Argyle managed to reduce the tension, it is worrying to me that Ralph Gonzalez continues to play a key role when in fact he seems to be more in the Venezuelan camp than in support of our territorial integrity. And I didn't judge this solely from, I judge it from his own comments. And to me, it is deeply worrying.
Finally, Mr. Norton, CARICOM is not what CARICOM was some decades back. Forbes Burnham, former president, first executive president, and first prime minister of independent Guyana, is recorded in history as one of the founding fathers of Caribbean Free Trade Area, which later emerged as the Caribbean Community CARICOM. CARICOM rallied around Caribbean states on issues such as this. Guyana has never had any doubt about CARICOM support in the past. But the relationships that have been developed between Venezuela through Petrocaribbean with Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and so on, seem to have put that quality of support in a bit of jeopardy. Is the government of Guyana doing enough to counter that? Can Guyana's oil resources be used in such a way as to bring CARICOM back to where it was as a central block of countries relying on each other? Diplomatically, economically, can petroleum help Guyana in CARICOM with respect to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy and in general?
I did say earlier that we should use oil resources as a form of our economic diplomacy. So I do believe it can be used. But the problem is deeper. When you talk about Forbes Burnham doing what he did, he had a functioning foreign ministry. Ambassadors in capitals doing what they had to do and keeping them abreast. At different levels of the foreign service, you're engaging your colleagues in those countries, sensitizing them. What has happened is that we have now developed parachute diplomacy, which I call it, where the president parachutes into a capital or into a meeting
and believes that that is enough to obtain support. It isn't. You have to have a structured approach in which you are engaging these countries, particularly their foreign service, at the different levels. Look, in any ministry that is functioning properly, if a government is going to prepare a position, it's the foreign service officers will prepare it. And if they are not being targeted and provided the information and being equipped to do it, then we will fail. And it is the reason for some of the failures we have. Diplomacy is complex. It has different levels, and you have got to be engaging at the different levels. Every time I hear of a summit with the president, and there isn't before the diplomatic work and the clarification of positions, and knowing exactly what is it you're going to sign to, I worry. Because in normal diplomacy, your technocratic diplomats do the political work, do the diplomatic work, and by the time it arrives at the level of the president, you would have already worked out the intricacies of it and know that what you're going to sign to reflects our interests. When you parachute and sign a document, it means that you did not put it through the intellectual crucible that is necessary for you to unravel all the elements and then arrive at your position. And so, in my opinion, the fact that the institution called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not functioning in the way that it should function. I do not see a situation where the foreign minister of Guyana travels and has the confidence of all the foreign ministers. I traveled with Rashley Jackson as foreign minister many times. And one of the things that was evident was that when you arrive at a conference or in any institutional framework, he had direct contact, knew them, our ambassadors, knew the actors, and you could have sat and say, okay, Barbados will be our support on this one. Okay, this one is low-lying. And I'm going to give you a practical problem. When we started the discussions in the environment, there was the focus on small island states. I remember Barbados were very strong on it. You had to engage Barbados. You had to engage the islands, establish the similarities between islands and low-lying coastal states like Guyana, and then work with them to get an agreement that when we speak, we will speak of small island states and low-lying coastal countries, which articulated Guyana interests. You are not seeing that kind of work to ensure that in the final analysis, our interest is promoted. I go to forests. When the environmental thing emerged and there was all this concern about forests, and the minute people heard Amazon, they felt, oh, everything was cut down. You had to put together the data on Guyana's forests, pointing out that most of the forest cover was intact, and then articulate a position for Guyana as an Amazon country to be treated differently because we didn't have high levels of deforestation. That is diplomatic work. The government is not doing diplomatic work, and it's sad for us.
I know I said finally, but there's one other question I want to stick in here.
One other is different to final.
There's one other question beyond final that I want to bring here. Guyana has a permanent representative at the level of the United Nations. Guyana occupies a seat at the UN Security Council. In the same vein of the closing part of your last response, what has Guyana done from the level of the permanent representative and utilizing the UN Security Council seat with respect to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy? And that's my final question for today.
I don't know what I can say that they did. What I can tell you is evident is that work is not being done in the way it used to be done. The UN system is seen as one of the cheapest means for a small country to engage virtually all the countries. And therefore, the UN mission, in my opinion, should have been a source of documentation, first of all, to other countries. It should be in the place where there are a lot of bilaterals on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy and developing our positions and engaging, and at the same time seeking to put pressure and isolate Venezuela in the UN system. I see no evidence of that approach. What I see is just the glam of saying I am in the UN Security Council. But in terms of a structured program with the relevant diplomatic outreach to ensure that we are significantly influential and constituting a kind of a constraint to Venezuela operating, I don't see that. And I think that stems from the dysfunction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Sad to say, I have heard nothing from this foreign minister that suggests to me that he's foreign minister material. And so I anticipate, if that is the case, that liturgy, etc., will trickle down. And you would not get the robust, vibrant foreign policy approach that is needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform, leader of the parliamentary opposition, future president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, for taking time out from your busy schedule to join us here on Nation Watch and to enlighten our listening and viewing public on the issues we discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and staying with us the course of the program. Until we meet again next Sunday, God bless.